Hey guys, I'm Jax and I just saw Boy Kills World, a blood-soaked revenge tale unlike anything you've ever seen before. Not because of any of the revenge aspects of this film, they are all exactly the same as every single revenge film you've ever seen in your entire life. No, this film has one trick up its sleeve, and that is that its lead revenge-seeking boy, the boy who wants to kill the world, he is mute and deaf, but he has an inner monologue narrated by Archer from Archer. And I know what you're thinking. Archer from Archer, Bob from Bob's Burgers, that mixed can of vegetables from Wet Hot American Summer, that guy is hilarious. This must be the funniest movie ever. Bill Skarsgård ripped and shredded in a dystopian nightmare universe on a revenge quest for revenge, and he's ripped and shredded and stoic. But his inner monologue is the mixed can of vegetables from Wet Hot American Summer, just quipping and Deadpooling all over the place. This is going to be an absolute delight. What a fun combination of two things that probably aren't going to work, but I presume since they made a movie, they somehow made it work. And I would love to tell you that it totally works, and it's a really fun combination of two things that shouldn't work, but they somehow made it work. But it doesn't work. It's super weird and jarring, and the inner monologue doesn't really feel like it's coming from the same character. Bill Skarsgård is so stoic and bloodthirsty, and he's filled with the need for revenge. He's so angry and intense, and he feels like that as the character. His physicality for like 80% of it is just so intense and visceral and powerful. He is a fantastic action hero. But then the inner monologue is like, whoa, let's go. I'm Archer from Archer. And he's doing a classic Archer from Archer thing. It's funny and silly. Well, it's trying to be funny. It's not funny at all. But that's the script's fault. That's not Archer's fault. Archer does what he does best. But the style and the tone and just the way he presents himself and the way he's always like, well, that just happened. And he's always quipping and joking and saying Deadpool-y kind of stuff. It's very juvenile and silly. But like everything you're hearing doesn't match what you're seeing from Bill Skarsgård. And every now and then he tries to match it and tries to do something like where you see him kind of give a little bit of a wink and a nod, like, that just happened. It still doesn't really fit the inner voice. And often when he does his inner voice jokes and stuff, everyone else in the room is just standing there. Because, obviously it's a monologue, like an inner monologue narration. So obviously no one can hear what he's saying. So he's just standing there awkwardly. And sometimes he raises his eyebrow or does like a thing. But it doesn't really make sense. And it just comes across as really awkward and weird. And it's just a really weird combination of two things that just doesn't work. On paper, and the casting, spectacular. In practice and execution, oh boy, no good. Boy Kills World. More like Boy Plagiarizes World, because this film feels like it's plagiarizing like every single film you've ever seen. Not just the idea of a revenge film, because all revenge films are kind of the same, where it's like, I was a boy, then my family died, then I did a training montage, and now I'm doing a big revenge. It's like, no, that's like every single revenge film. It's just the way that this felt like it was everything I've already seen. It reminded me shockingly of Rebel Moon, but for just a completely different set of films that it was mimicking, but mimicking worse. Like, this isn't a Tarantino thing where you're like, it's the same shot as that movie nobody's seen. Sure, but he made it his own somehow. There's something about Tarantino where he just has this kind of flavor and this edge and this style that feels so distinctive that he can steal a scene and you're like, no, but see how much more Tarantino-y it is. Whereas whoever directed this, I can't remember his name, it's here, maybe, depends on how tired I am, he kind of feels like he's doing the things, but just to a lesser extent. It feels like it's budget everything that it's mimicking, which is a lot. This film is essentially budget Kill Bill, meets budget Hunger Games, meets budget Deadpool, meets budget John Wick, meets budget Edgar Wright's style on crack, meets budget Guns Akimbo. And just to be clear, when I say home brand Guns Akimbo, that is not a compliment. I love Daniel Radcliffe as much as the next Harry Potter fanatic. I do. I love how weird and crazy his film choices have been. He's like, look at me, I've got guns nailed to my hands or whatever was happening. But that film is so frantic and manic and colorful. It feels so forced though. It feels so like, wah! without any cohesion about what the kind of vibe and frenetic manic feeling is going to be. So it's just all over the place, and it's just loud and obnoxious, and it's just too much. It's too much, man. This is the same. It's just too much. I love a camera that goes, whoa, and the camera's got like a life of its own. I love that shot in Evil Dead where it's like, it's the camera's the Evil Dead, and it's all like, and it's going through like the forest or whatever. But there's a rhyme and a reason and like a creative choice that makes sense for the story as to why the camera is moving in that way. Edgar Wright has a really frenetic, frantic, chaotic sense of like editing and cutting and camera movements. But there's always such an obvious choice and reasoning behind why he does it the way he does it. And it flows and it moves and it feels like this cohesive thing, even though it can be so frenetic and intense at times. And the most important thing is there's never a moment where you like, stop moving the camera, stop doing things. I can't see what's happening on screen. I can't follow the action. This film will sometimes just hold on a moment, or the camera will move in really interesting, clever ways. And you're like, wow, what an inventive, clever, creative action set piece. And then it will just like keep going and then keep going to the point where you're like, I've lost. You've lost me. This film feels like it's doing something so clever. And then suddenly it's just like, more. And it's like, oh, yeah. Somehow a film that is so over the top in its nature, this blood-soaked, crazy, over-the-top revenge film that is an exaggerated, over-the-top parody satire of all these things and these big, insane, over-the-top set pieces and ideas. But somehow, while doing it so big, he's then made the film too big and he never brought it down to a level that kind of works. It's just too much, man. Also, and this might be the biggest reason why I disliked some of the action, or kind of most of the action, is that I love a big, gory, blood-soaked, crazy action set piece. I love that kind of style of film, but when you've got a budget limitation, which I have to imagine is the reason, surely it wasn't a creative decision to be like, hey, let's use CG blood everywhere all the time. That's going to be cool visually. People are going to want to see CGI blood rather than like actual practical visceral blood exploding everywhere. Let's just do it in post. Surely it wasn't a lazy decision from the director. Surely it's like a budget constraint. I have to imagine. And so it just annoys me that he's like, okay, we're going to kill 20 people today. We can do 2 practically and then 18 CGI. Maybe don't kill 20 people then if you don't have the budget to do it properly, because you kind of become numb to it and it just doesn't feel like anything. Boy kills world. More like boy kills the idea that there's one sexy Skarsgård and one weird Skarsgård. Because now there's 2 sexy Skarsgårds. Boy kills world. More like boy kills cinema. Because the movie's not good. That feels too harsh. It's not that bad. Like, it's not good, but it's not like that bad. Like, by the end, I'm like, yeah, there were punching and kicking and stuff happened or whatever. Just that humor in that middle hour and 20 minutes of this hour and 50-minute movie. It's just not great. Like, there is a couple of moments where you're like, that's not the worst thing I've ever seen. And there are other times where you're like, please stop with the humor. It's just a movie that thinks it's funny and it's not. And is there anything worse and more uncomfortable and cringy and just kind of awkward and off than someone or something that thinks they're funny but just isn't? Why are you all looking at me like that?